Okay, so do you have a
Yep.
couple slides? Just some visuals here. So I work for the Department of Agriculture, and I'm working on developing techniques for routine monitoring of evapotranspiration, water use, water availability at multiple spatial scales, from global continental scales down to field and subfield scales. And there is an increasing demand for this kind of water use information recently, given the increase in pressures on our global freshwater resources because of climate change, expanding populations. But where we found that the demand for water use information is most strong recently are at the finest spatial scales, at the field and the subfield scales. Because this is the scale at which most water use decisions are being made on a worldwide basis, frankly. And it's also a scale where we can discriminate water use, water productivity, water efficiency between different crop types and between different management strategies. And this is why Landsat and its high spatial resolution, its global coverage has become so kind of critical to the work that we're doing in the USDA. To make these maps of evapotranspiration that you see here, we utilize most of the bands on Landsat, but the most critical band for ET mapping we have found to be the thermal band that gives us these high spatial resolution maps of land surface temperature. Land surface temperature is a high value state variable. It gives us very useful information, spatially distributed information at very fine spatial scales about the surface moisture status, about vegetation health, vegetation stress. It's very difficult to obtain through other types of means. Using models that are based on principles of surface energy balance, we can use these land surface temperature maps to estimate how much evaporative cooling must be occurring, how much evaporative flux must be occurring to keep the soil and the vegetation at the temperatures that are observed in these temperature maps. These thermal-based ET algorithms have really evolved very strongly over and significantly over the past decade, to the point where they've become very robust and very much embraced in the water resource management community worldwide, and particularly in the Western United States. Our group, other groups have done a lot of comparisons, if you can go to the next slide, between different methods for mapping evapotranspiration spatially. There are the vegetation index approaches, the so-called crop coefficient methods, where you assume that most of the evapotranspiration is associated with areas of high green vegetation amount. There are water balance methods that are implemented in most of the prognostic land surface modeling systems. There's the thermal-based approaches. Each of these approaches has its strengths and weaknesses. But for the kinds of questions that the water resource managers are asking us today, it's consistently found that these thermal techniques provide unique and robust information. So here's a comparison, for example, between a thermal retrieval of ET and a vegetation index-based retrieval. And this is over an irrigated area in Idaho. These maps were provided by Rick Allen. And you can see that the vegetation index approach is missing a lot of soil evaporation flux in areas where the fields are bare or fallow, because there's no green vegetation amount there. Seasonally, you're gonna significantly underestimate the water use over this landscape based on those methods. If you can go to the next slide. The water balance methods, we also find that the thermal techniques are better able to capture kind of localized enhancements in the evaporative flux that may not necessarily be directly associated with local precipitation rates. Ancillary moisture sources that are difficult to model a priori in some of these hydrologic modeling systems. This is example over the Nile River Basin with a thermal retrieval and a water balance retrieval on the right, thermal on the left. The regional patterns are very similar, but you can see some areas of significant difference. If you can hit return or enter. Okay, so you can see the thermal retrieval captures the enhanced evaporative flux over the intensely irrigated Nile River Delta. The middle box is another irrigation scheme in Sudan. That's the Gezira scheme. We see an enhancement there. And then the bottom box is the Sud wetland, which is a major sink of water along the White Nile course. Very important for water management to be able to quantify these types of water uses and sinks for river management, but very difficult to capture, as you can see in the kind of water balance prognostic modeling systems, unless you know a priori where the irrigation is occurring, where the groundwater tables are shallow. And these are exactly the kind of features, water use features, that the water managers are interested in. The thermal signal gives us kind of a priori information about these ancillary sources without need for a lot of a priori knowledge about what's going on. And a final advantage is that the thermal techniques are very sensitive to rapid onset of stress. Very useful for early warning and drought detection. We can see a signal in these thermal ET maps well before we see a degradation in optical vegetation indices. So this is kind of the reason why the water resource managers have become so enamored of these thermal techniques. In terms of requirements to fulfill these kind of mapping applications, spatial requirements, if you can hit the return again. I'm showing you a map here made with geostationary data, but clearly we want to get down to the scale of individual farm fields. In the United States, farm field may be typically on the order of a couple hundred meters. Field sizes can be much smaller in other parts of the world. So the 60-meter thermal resolution of Landsat 7 was very, very nice. 100-meter resolution of Landsat 8 is fine too. We do have some techniques for sharpening up thermal imagery down to the resolution of the short wave bands. Kind of helps to overcome some of these minor differences in resolution and get that thermal data at the same resolution as the short wave bands. But going much more coarser than 100 meters, we're going to start to lose some sensitivity at the field scale. In terms of temporal sampling, I think the requirements are more stringent for the thermal band than they might be for the shortwave bands used for land cover classification and crop monitoring. Land surface temperature is a very dynamic variable, and that's one of its strengths, but it also makes it a challenge to monitor. You got the strong diurnal cycle on the land surface temperature curve, and you also have strong day-to-day variability due to changing climatic drivers, changing moisture conditions, cumulative evaporation, rainfall events, stress developing in the vegetation. And ideally, we'd really like to capture those day-to-day variations in the thermal band. I don't think that's a feasible goal at this point in the Sustainable Land Imaging Program. We need at least one clear sky acquisition per month, at least, to do a credible job at retrieving seasonal ET using these thermal methodologies. More sampling, weekly, bi-weekly sampling would be beneficial. Now, we're impacted by cloud cover. Rick Allen and his group have done some studies using MODIS data over the continental United States and determined that a 4-day revisit cycle gives us that target of one clear sky per month over most of the continental United States for the majority of the years. So that would be a tremendous goal if that could be achieved. 8 days, we work really well back in 2002, 2003 with the fully functional Landsat 5 and 7. We can work with that. The 16 days of a single Landsat is a challenge, and we need to fuse in information from other data sources to capture credibly some of the events that occur between Landsat overpasses. So those are my recommendations for spatial and temporal resolution. If you can go to the very last slide, I'll wrap it up here. This is an example of the thermal image sharpening and the impact on the ET retrievals. The upper maps, I believe those are Landsat 7 ET maps. The lower two maps are using sharpened thermal imagery at 30 meters resolution. This is over Norman, Oklahoma. You can see the kind of interpretive detail that you can recover with this sharpening kind of algorithm. You can see the vegetation in the residential areas between the streets. You can even see the fairways in the golf course sticking out there, really, really heavily irrigated fairways. This is made possible because of the simultaneous collection of the thermal and the shortwave resolution data. Being both on the same Landsat platform, we use the shortwave data to sharpen up the thermal band imagery. There is some talk about possibly separating these instruments. This may be one of the casualties of doing that. So,
Well, thank you very much, Martha. Rick?